You're the apex predator of your galaxy. Your species has conquered 1,000 worlds, enslaved entire civilizations, and turned conquest into an art form. Your weapons can crack planets, your fleets blot out stars, and your very name sends shivers through the cosmos. You've studied every possible enemy, calculated every tactical scenario, and prepared for every conceivable threat. But there's one thing you never prepared for. One thing that doesn't show up in your databases or tactical simulations. One thing that your superior intellect, advanced technology, and millennia of warfare couldn't predict. Humanity. Not because humans are the strongest, they're not. Not because they have the best technology, they don't. Not because they're the smartest, far from it. But because when you back a human into a corner, when you threaten everything they hold dear, when you make the mistake of thinking you understand what they're capable of, that's when you discover why Earth's children don't just survive. They become something else entirely. Something that turns your certain victory into your species' greatest nightmare. The Zephyrian Empire thought they knew what they were dealing with when their scouts found that little blue planet in the Outer Rim. They thought humans would be just another primitive species to catalog, study, and eventually harvest. They were wrong. Dead wrong. And this is a story of how the galaxy's most feared conquerors learned that some prey fights back. The scout ship Talon's Edge drifted silently through the void, its bioorganic hull pulsing with a faint purple luminescence. Commander Vextar adjusted his primary sensory stalks, focusing on the tactical display that floated before him like a three-dimensional constellation of death. The hologram showed a small blue-green planet, the third world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in what the Galactic Confederation called its Sector 7749 Delta. Initial scans complete, Commander, reported Sensor Specialist Krillian, her chitinous fingers dancing across the neural interface panel. The planet shows clear signs of industrial civilization. Primitive, but advancing rapidly. Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among the Zephyrian species. After 300 cycles of conquest across 47 star systems, he had seen countless worlds like this one. Young civilizations, barely capable of splitting the atom, thinking themselves alone in the universe. They made for excellent subjects once properly subdued. Technological level, he inquired, his voice a harmonious blend of clicks and whistles that the ship's translation matrix would render into whatever barbaric tongue the locals spoke. Pre-stellar flight capability. They've achieved chemical rockets and have established primitive orbital installations. Energy output suggests they've mastered nuclear fission, but not fusion. Their electromagnetic emissions indicate a highly connected information network. Krillian paused, her sensory organs twitching. Commander, there's something unusual about their communication patterns. Elaborate. The quantum resonance suggests an unusually high level of coordination for such a primitive species. Most civilizations at this development stage show fragmented territorial communication clusters. These, humans, the translation matrix calls them, they demonstrate remarkable global interconnectedness despite maintaining separate political entities. Vextar stored this information in his tactical memory banks. The Zephyrian Empire had perfected the science of conquest over millennia. They understood that every species had predictable patterns, evolutionary traits that could be exploited. Hive minds fell to disruption of their central nodes. Individual-focused species collapsed when their leaders were eliminated. Highly territorial races could be turned against each other with minimal effort. Begin deep space observation protocols, he commanded. I want detailed behavioral analysis, population distribution, industrial capacity, and military assessment. Standard survey duration. The next 30 solar rotations passed in meticulous observation. The Talon's Edge remained cloaked beyond the system's detection threshold, while sophisticated sensors mapped every aspect of human civilization. What they found was both typical and oddly disturbing. Humans, the crew learned, were bipedal mammals who had achieved dominance over their world through tool use and pack cooperation. Their planet, which they called Earth, teemed with biodiversity that suggested a robust ecosystem. Initial population estimates placed their numbers at over 7 billion individuals, distributed across 7 major landmasses. They're remarkably prolific, observed Chief Analyst Moore Dunn during the daily briefing. Most species at this technological level maintain populations in the low millions. These humans have achieved numbers typically seen only in advanced stellar civilizations. Population density indicates high agricultural efficiency, added Krillian. They've modified approximately 30% of their planet's surface for food production. Quite impressive for primitives. But it was the military assessment that gave Vextar pause. "Show me the weapons analysis," he commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing a complex array of projectile weapons, explosive devices, and delivery systems. What struck the Zephyrian commander was not the sophistication of the weapons themselves, but their sheer quantity and variety. "By the eternal void," whispered Mordun, "they have enough nuclear weapons to sterilize their own planet several times over. And yet they haven't used them," noted Vextar thoughtfully. "Curious. Most species either destroy themselves with such weapons or abandon them once they understand the risks. These humans have maintained massive arsenals for over half a century." "There's more, Commander." Krillian's voice carried an unusual tension. "Their conventional military forces are equally extensive. Every major political entity maintains significant armed forces, but observe the distribution patterns." The display zoomed in on various continents, highlighting military installations, naval fleets, and air forces. What emerged was a picture of a species that had turned warfare into an exact science, despite never facing an external threat. "They fight each other," Mordun stated, his voice filled with a mixture of fascination and revulsion that Zephyrians felt when observing particularly savage behavior. "Constantly," confirmed Krillian. "But there's a pattern. These conflicts are limited in scope and duration. When faced with truly global threats, they demonstrate remarkable unity. Weather disasters, seismic events, pandemic diseases, all met with coordinated international responses." Vextar studied the data streams flowing across his neural interface. Human history unfolded before him like a vast tactical simulation. Wars that had consumed entire continents, technological leaps driven by military necessity, and a species that seemed to thrive under pressure in ways that defied evolutionary logic. "Their learning curve is unprecedented," he observed. "Look at this timeline. From first powered flight to orbital insertion in less than 70 years. From basic computers to global information networks in half that time. It's the conflict that drives them," Mordun suggested. "Each war accelerates their development. They don't just adapt to challenges, they appear to seek them out." The observation period revealed other troubling patterns. Humans demonstrated unusual creativity in problem-solving, often developing multiple solutions to the same challenge. Their entertainment media was filled with scenarios of alien invasion, suggesting a species that had already considered the possibility of external threats. Most disturbing of all was their apparent inability to submit to authority without resistance, even within their own social structures. Preliminary conquest assessment. Vextar requested on the final day of observation. Mordun consulted his analysis matrices. "Standard pacification protocols should prove effective, though we recommend deploying larger occupation forces than typical for a pre-stellar civilization. These humans show unusual attachment to concepts of individual liberty and territorial sovereignty. Expect higher than normal resistance during the initial subjugation phase. Resource yield. Excellent. The planet is rich in heavy elements, rare earth minerals, and has extensive water reserves. The existing industrial infrastructure could be adapted for imperial needs with minimal modification. The population could provide significant labor resources, though we recommend biological modification to reduce their aggressive tendencies." Military threat assessment. Krillian interfaced directly with the tactical computers, her consciousness merging temporarily with the ship's analytical systems. Negligible. Their most advanced weapons are chemical rockets carrying fusion warheads. Effective radius limited to their own star system. Their space-based assets are minimal and vulnerable. Fleet Command estimates a 97% probability of successful conquest using a standard three-wave assault pattern. Vextar felt the familiar satisfaction of another successful survey. The humans would make fine additions to the Empire once properly trained. Their high population and rapid development suggested they would be valuable as a labor caste, particularly if their aggressive tendencies could be channeled productively. Prepare the conquest recommendation for Fleet Command, he ordered. Classification, Standard Subjugation, Resource Priority Alpha, Population Harvest authorized. As the Talon's Edge began its journey back to Zephyrian space, none of its crew suspected they had just made the most catastrophic misassessment in their empire's history. The data they carried would trigger a chain of events that would shatter everything they thought they knew about warfare, survival, and the terrible price of underestimating an enemy. In the depths of space, the message traveled at faster-than-light speeds toward the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Fleet Command received the report with typical efficiency, processing it through standard conquest protocols. Within 7 solar cycles, the recommendation had been approved, resources allocated, and strike forces assembled. The first battle fleet, comprising 300 ships and nearly 1 million Zephyrian warriors, began its journey toward the small blue planet and its unsuspecting human population. Admiral Thekmore, veteran of 17 successful conquests, commanded the expedition with the confidence of someone who had never experienced defeat. The fleet would arrive in human space in 43 standard days. The final preparations for what the Zephyrians confidently expected to be their easiest victory in decades proceeded with mechanical precision. On Earth, humanity continued its daily existence, unaware that their world had been marked for conquest. Children played in parks while their parents worked and worried about mundane concerns. Scientists studied the stars, soldiers trained for terrestrial conflicts, and philosophers debated the possibility of life among the cosmos. None of them knew that their greatest test was approaching from the void between the stars, or that they were about to prove themselves to be something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that became more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. The trap was set, though neither side realized it yet. The Zephyrians saw only another primitive world to be harvested. Humanity saw only the infinite night sky, beautiful and eternal in its apparent emptiness. Neither understood that first contact would begin not with diplomacy or warning, but with the sound of orbital bombardment and the screams of the dying. Neither grasped that this encounter would redefine what it meant to be human, what it meant to be alien, and what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. The stage was set for a war that would echo through galactic history, remembered not for its beginning, but for the moment when the galaxy's apex predators realized they had chosen the wrong prey. Dr. Sarah Chan was reviewing telescope data at the Arecibo Observatory when the universe changed forever. The radio telescope had been tracking what appeared to be an unusual gravitational anomaly in the outer system for the past 6 hours, something that defied conventional explanation. The readings suggested massive objects moving at impossible speeds, decelerating from near-light velocity to subluminal speeds in a matter of minutes. "Miguel, are you seeing this?" she called her colleague, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, who was monitoring deep space communications from the adjacent control station. "If by this, you mean approximately 300 objects roughly the size of aircraft carriers appearing from nowhere in our outer system, then yes, I'm seeing it." Miguel's voice carried the strained calm of someone whose worldview was crumbling in real time. "Sarah, I'm picking up electromagnetic emissions from those objects. Complex patterns, definitely artificial." The two astronomers stared at their instruments, understanding that they were witnessing humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Within minutes, their observations were being transmitted to every major observatory, space agency, and government facility on the planet. Admiral Thekmore stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Devourer of Worlds, watching as Earth grew larger in the tactical display. The blue-green planet hung before him like a ripe fruit, waiting to be plucked. Around him, the first battle fleet assumed standard invasion formation, a three-dimensional array of death that had crushed 47 civilizations. Fleet status report, he commanded, his voice carrying across the bioneural network that connected every ship in the Armada. All vessels operational and maintaining formation, responded Fleet Coordinator Genkai. Weapons systems charged, defensive screens active. Ground assault forces report ready for immediate deployment. Planetary defense assessment. Minimal active tracking systems, all primitive electromagnetic-based. No evidence of energy shields, kinetic barriers, or space-based weapons platforms. We're detecting increased communication traffic planet-wide, but no coordinated military response. Thekmore felt the familiar satisfaction of a hunt nearing its conclusion. The humans were reacting exactly as predicted, with confusion and panic rather than organized resistance. In his experience, pre-stellar civilizations always followed the same pattern. Initial disbelief, followed by attempts at communication, then panic, and finally desperate but futile resistance. Begin Phase 1 orbital bombardment, he ordered. Target military installations, communication nodes, and population centers above 5 million inhabitants. Standard intimidation protocol. The first energy beams lanced down from orbit 12 minutes later, striking strategic targets across 6 continents simultaneously. The Cheyenne Mountain complex vanished in a flash of superheated plasma. The Pentagon followed seconds later, along with military headquarters in Moscow, Beijing, London, New Delhi, and Brasilia. The attacks were precisely calibrated, devastating enough to cripple organized resistance, but limited enough to preserve valuable infrastructure and population resources. President Rebecca Morrison was in the White House Situation Room when the first reports began flooding in. The secure bunker, built to withstand nuclear attack, shuddered as something struck Washington, D.C. with the force of a small sun. Emergency power kicked in as the main electrical grid failed, leaving the room illuminated by harsh red lighting. Madam President, General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, spoke through the chaos. We've lost contact with NORAD, the Pentagon, and approximately 60% of our major military installations. Similar attacks reported worldwide. Whatever hit us isn't from Earth. Morrison stared at the tactical displays, showing damage assessments flooding in from around the globe. Cities burning, communications networks fragmenting, military command structures decapitating. In the span of 15 minutes, humanity had been thrust from peaceful isolation into a war for survival against an enemy they couldn't even comprehend. Options, General? Limited. Our satellite network is being systematically destroyed. What we're seeing suggests orbital weapons platforms of unprecedented sophistication. Early estimates put the attacking force at several hundred large vessels, each one capable of cracking a mountain. Nuclear response? General Hayes shook her head grimly. Our strategic missile forces are reporting massive failures across all systems. Not mechanical failure, electromagnetic. Whatever's up there is jamming our guidance systems, making our ICBMs worthless. Morrison felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She was the first human leader to face extinction from the stars, and every decision she made in the next few minutes might determine whether humanity survived the day. Give me every world leader still alive, she ordered. Whatever differences we've had, we're all in this together now. Across the planet, humanity was discovering what it meant to face a technologically superior enemy. Colonel Jack Harrison was commanding the 1st Armored Division when the sky caught fire above Fort Knox. The energy beam that struck the base turned 60-year-old concrete and steel into molten slag in seconds. But Harrison and most of his units survived in their hardened bunkers. "Sir, we've got movement." Sergeant Lisa Park pointed at her radar screen. which showed dozens of objects descending from orbit. Whatever they are, they're big and coming down fast. Harrison grabbed his field glasses and stepped outside the bunker. Against the smoke-filled sky, he could see them now, sleek vehicles the size of office buildings drifting down on columns of controlled energy. As he watched, the first transport touched down 3 kilometers away, and something that looked like a cross between a spider and a shark began deploying troops. "Well, I'll be damned," Harrison muttered. Aliens. Real, honest-to-God aliens. The creatures that emerged from the transport were like nothing from Earth's evolutionary tree. Bipedal, but distinctly arthropod, with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like black metal. They moved with predatory grace, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Within minutes, hundreds of them were advancing across the Kentucky landscape, laying waste to everything in their path. "Orders, sir?" asked Park. Harrison studied the advancing enemy through his binoculars. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons cutting through trees and buildings like tissue paper. By any reasonable military assessment, his division was outgunned, outmanned, and facing certain annihilation. "Load armor-piercing rounds," he ordered. "Prep the artillery. If these bastards want to fight, let's give them one they'll remember." Similar scenes were playing out across the globe. In the ruins of Moscow, General Dmitry Volkov was organizing the remnants of the Russian army around the subway tunnels, turning the underground network into a fortress. In what remained of Beijing, Colonel Li Wei was leading his forces into the urban maze, preparing for guerrilla warfare among the skyscrapers. Dr. Robert Kim was in his laboratory at MIT when the invasion began. As a theoretical physicist specializing in exotic matter research, he had been working on projects that most of his colleagues considered impossible. When the first reports of alien technology reached a secure bunker, his mind immediately began racing through possibilities. The energy signatures we're detecting, he explained to his assistant, Janet Walsh, as they watched live feeds of the attack. They're using controlled antimatter reactions for propulsion and weapons. The precision required suggests computational capabilities beyond anything we've achieved. "So we're screwed?" Janet asked bluntly. "Not necessarily. Superior technology doesn't guarantee victory. The question is whether we can adapt faster than they can respond to our adaptations." Kim was already formulating plans, theoretical applications of his research that could level the playing field. The aliens had superior individual weapons and ships, but they were operating under assumptions about human capabilities that might not account for humanity's greatest advantage, their ability to innovate under pressure. Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Thekmore was reviewing the initial phase results. The bombardment had proceeded flawlessly, crippling human military capabilities and communications. Ground forces were reporting steady progress across all major population centers. "Resistance level?" he inquired. "Higher than anticipated, but within acceptable parameters," reported Ground Commander Vexnull. "The humans are proving more resilient than typical prestellar species. They're adapting to our tactics more quickly than predicted." Specific examples? In what their maps call North America, human forces are using underground tunnel systems to avoid our orbital surveillance. In the European continent, they're employing guerrilla tactics in urban environments, making our numerical advantage less effective. In Asia, we're encountering coordinated resistance across multiple nation-states, suggesting they've established some form of communication despite our jamming efforts. Thekmore dismissed these concerns with a gesture. "Primitive species always show initial resistance. Maintain standard conquest protocols. Phase 2 commences in 6 standard hours." But even as he spoke, reports were filtering in from ground units that painted a more complex picture. Human weapons, while primitive, were proving surprisingly effective against Zephyrian infantry. Their chemical explosive devices could damage Zephyrian vehicles if employed creatively. Most concerning, humans seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics in real time. Captain Sarah Mitchell was leading her Marine unit through the ruins of San Diego when she got her first close look at the enemy. Her squad had been trapped in a suburban neighborhood when the aliens landed, cut off from command, and facing an enemy they knew nothing about. "Contact front!" shouted Corporal Davis as 3 Zephyrian soldiers rounded a corner, their energy weapons charging with an ominous whine. Mitchell's training kicked in. "Spread out. Use the buildings for cover. Concentrate fire." The engagement lasted less than 2 minutes, but it taught her everything she needed to know. The aliens were fast, and their weapons were devastating, but they moved in predictable patterns. They relied on their technological superiority rather than tactical innovation. Most importantly, they could be killed. "Collect their equipment," she ordered after the firefight ended. "And give me everything you can find about their biology. If we're going to fight these things, we need to understand them." Across the planet, similar lessons were being learned. Humanity was discovering that their enemies, for all their technological advancement, were following rigid tactical doctrines. They expected their opponents to behave in predictable ways, and when humans didn't cooperate with those expectations, the aliens seemed momentarily confused. Dr. Elizabeth Harper was working in her CDC laboratory in Atlanta when the invasion began. As one of the world's leading experts in xenobiology, she had spent her career studying extremophile organisms that survived in impossible conditions. When samples of alien technology and biology began reaching underground resistance networks, she found herself at the center of humanity's effort to understand their attackers. "Fascinating," she murmured, studying tissue samples under an electron microscope. "Their cellular structure is completely alien, but there are vulnerabilities. Their immune systems appear optimized for their home environment. Earth's bacterial and viral ecosystem might pose unexpected challenges for them." This information was quickly disseminated through the fragmentary communication networks that humanity had managed to maintain. Within hours, field commanders were learning that alien equipment could be disabled by certain electromagnetic frequencies, that their troops were vulnerable to specific chemical compounds, and that their tactical patterns could be predicted and exploited. Meanwhile, civilian populations were demonstrating the same adaptability that was surprising military commanders. In London, survivors were using the underground tunnel system to move supplies and coordinate resistance. In Tokyo, engineers were modifying construction equipment into improvised weapons platforms. In Sydney, marine biologists were working with the military to develop chemical agents based on Earth's marine toxins. The first day of the invasion ended with the Zephyrian Empire achieving most of its tactical objectives. Major military installations had been destroyed, communication networks fragmented, and ground forces had established footholds on every continent. By their calculations, organized human resistance should collapse within another 48 hours. They were wrong. As night fell across Earth, humanity was doing what it had always done in times of crisis: adapting, innovating, and preparing to fight back. In hidden laboratories, scientists were reverse engineering alien technology. In destroyed cities, soldiers were learning to fight a new kind of war. In government bunkers, leaders were coordinating a global resistance that transcended every previous political division. The Zephyrian Empire had awakened something in humanity that they didn't understand and couldn't predict. The same species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had spent centuries fighting each other and learning from every conflict, was now focused entirely on a single enemy. For the first time in their history, the galaxy's apex predators were about to discover what happened when the prey fought back with intelligence, creativity, and the desperate fury of a species that refused to go extinct. The real war was about to begin. 72 hours into the invasion, Dr. Robert Kim made the breakthrough that would change everything. Working in his makeshift laboratory 50 feet beneath MIT's ruins, surrounded by salvaged alien technology and jury-rigged human equipment, he cracked the fundamental principle behind Zephyrian energy weapons. "It's not magic," he whispered to himself, staring at the equations scrolling across his improvised computer screen. "It's just physics we haven't discovered yet." The alien weapons operated by manipulating exotic matter at the quantum level, creating controlled annihilation reactions that released enormous amounts of energy. The technology was centuries beyond current human science, but Kim realized that didn't mean it was beyond human understanding. Janet, he called to his assistant, who was monitoring communications from the resistance networks. Give me everything we have on the alien power sources. I think I know how to shut them down. Similar breakthrough moments were occurring across the globe as humanity's greatest minds focused on the singular problem of survival. In the rubble of CERN, Dr. Maria Santos had discovered that the aliens' faster-than-light communication system created detectable gravitational ripples. In the flooded tunnels beneath Tokyo, DR, Hiroshi Nakamura was developing algorithms that could predict Zephyrian troop movements based on their rigid tactical patterns. Admiral Thekmore was growing increasingly concerned about the reports flooding in from his ground commanders. What should have been a routine mopping-up operation was turning into something unprecedented in Zephyrian military history. Explain these casualty figures, he demanded, his mandibles clicking with agitation as he reviewed the latest battlefield reports. Ground Commander Vexnull interfaced with the tactical network, his consciousness briefly merging with the collective intelligence of the ground forces. The humans are not responding to conquest protocols as predicted, Admiral. They're demonstrating unusual adaptation capabilities. Elaborate. In Sector 7 of the North American continent, our forces encountered human military units employing kinetic projectile weapons. Standard doctrine suggested these primitive weapons would pose minimal threat to our armor systems. However, the humans have modified their ammunition with various chemical compounds that appear designed specifically to target our equipment vulnerabilities. The tactical display showed footage from the battlefield, shaky images captured by Zephyrian combat units. Human soldiers were indeed using conventional firearms, but the results were far from conventional. Bullets that should have bounced harmlessly off Zephyrian armor were instead causing catastrophic system failures. How are they identifying our vulnerabilities so rapidly? Thekmore asked. Unknown, Admiral. We've also observed humans employing improvised explosive devices with remarkable sophistication. They appear to be studying our equipment and developing targeted countermeasures within hours of each engagement. More disturbing reports followed. In what the humans called Europe, resistance fighters had learned to jam Zephyrian communications using modified commercial electronics. In Asia, human forces were using their planet's weather patterns to mask their movements from orbital surveillance. In Africa, tribal warriors armed with chemical weapons derived from local plants were proving surprisingly effective against technologically superior forces. Captain Sarah Mitchell was learning these lessons firsthand. Her Marine unit had grown from 12 survivors to over 300 fighters as they moved through the ruins of Southern California. Word of their successes had spread through the underground networks, drawing military personnel, civilians, and even gang members into a unified resistance force. The key is not to fight their strengths, she explained to a group of newly arrived Army Rangers during a briefing in an abandoned subway station. These aliens are individually superior to us in almost every way. Their weapons are better, their armor is stronger, and they have air support we can't match. She gestured to a crude tactical map drawn on the concrete wall. But they think in patterns. They expect us to behave like every other species they've conquered. When we don't follow their script, they become predictable. Sergeant Lisa Park, now Mitchell's second-in-command, added her own observations. Their squads always advance in the same formation. Their vehicles follow predetermined patrol routes. Their air support responds to threats using identical tactical patterns. Once you understand their doctrine, you can set traps. The proof was in their success rate. Mitchell's force had destroyed 17 Zephyrian vehicles, eliminated over 200 enemy soldiers, and captured enough alien equipment to arm their entire unit with energy weapons. More importantly, they had developed techniques that could be taught to other resistance cells. Dr. Elizabeth Harper was making equally significant discoveries in her hidden laboratory. Her analysis of alien biology had revealed several critical vulnerabilities that the resistance was already exploiting. Their immune systems are incredibly sophisticated, she explained to a secure video conference connecting resistance leaders across the globe. But they're also highly specialized for their home environment. Earth's microbial ecosystem is completely alien to them, which means they have no natural defenses against our bacteria and viruses. General Patricia Hayes, speaking from a bunker somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, leaned forward with interest. Are you saying we can make them sick? I'm saying we already are. Every Zephyrian soldier that spends more than 48 hours on Earth's surface shows signs of immune system stress. Their medical technology can compensate, but it's an ongoing drain on their resources. More importantly, it's affecting their combat effectiveness. This information was immediately disseminated to field commanders, who began incorporating biological warfare into their tactics. Not the obvious applications like weaponized diseases, but subtle environmental factors. Flooding Zephyrian positions forced them to operate in contaminated water. Smoke screens created with burning organic materials introduced alien pathogens into their air filtration systems. Even basic hygiene became a weapon, as human forces learned to contaminate areas they were abandoning. Meanwhile, engineers and mechanics around the world were achieving impossible feats of reverse engineering. In Detroit, former automotive workers were stripping down captured Zephyrian vehicles and learning to reproduce their power systems. In Seoul, electronics experts were cracking the aliens' computer networks and beginning to understand their information warfare capabilities. The breakthrough that changed the strategic balance came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thompson had been a video game designer before the invasion, specializing in complex military simulations. Trapped in the ruins of Seattle with a group of survivors, he had been observing Zephyrian tactics with the analytical eye of someone who understood game theory and artificial intelligence. They're not thinking, he realized during a planning session in an abandoned coffee shop. They're following algorithms, like really sophisticated video game NPCs, but still predictable once you understand the programming. Using his laptop and a jury-rigged connection to the fragmented internet, Marcus began mapping Zephyrian tactical responses. Within days, he had created a predictive model that could anticipate enemy movements with startling accuracy. The information spread through the resistance networks like wildfire, giving human forces their first genuine strategic advantage. Admiral Thekmore was facing a crisis unlike anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. His reports to Fleet Command grew increasingly desperate as the human resistance continued to evolve and adapt. The situation has exceeded acceptable parameters, he admitted during a secure conference with the High Command. Human forces are demonstrating capabilities not present in our initial assessment. High Admiral Morthek, veteran of 60 successful conquests, studied the tactical reports with growing alarm. Your ground forces outnumber the humans 5-1 and possess technological superiority in every category. How are you experiencing difficulties? The humans do not follow standard resistance patterns. They adapt their tactics in real time, develop countermeasures to our weapons within hours of first contact, and demonstrate unprecedented coordination despite their fragmented command structure. Specific examples. Thekmore highlighted sectors of the tactical display where red indicators showed Zephyrian losses. In this region, human forces identified our patrol patterns and began using improvised explosive devices positioned along our routes. When we modified our patrol schedules, they adapted within a single rotational period and began targeting our supply convoys instead. The display zoomed in on another battlefield. Here, humans developed chemical agents specifically designed to corrode our armor alloys. When we deployed environmental suits, they switched to kinetic weapons modified with electromagnetic pulse generators that disable our electronic systems. More examples followed, each one demonstrating the same pattern. Humans would encounter a Zephyrian advantage, study it, develop a countermeasure, and then share that countermeasure with other resistance cells across their planet. The rate of adaptation was unprecedented in galactic military history. Most concerning, Thekmore continued, is their apparent ability to predict our tactical responses. Human forces are positioning themselves to exploit weaknesses before we reveal those weaknesses exist. High Admiral Morthek studied the data with growing unease. In 600 years of Zephyrian expansion, no species had demonstrated this level of adaptive capability. Most civilizations followed predictable patterns of resistance, eventual submission, and integration into the empire. These humans seemed to grow more dangerous the longer the conflict continued. Deploy Phase 3 assault protocols, he finally ordered. Increase orbital bombardment intensity and begin systematic elimination of population centers. If they cannot be pacified through conventional means, reduce their numbers until compliance becomes inevitable. Back on Earth, Dr. Robert Kim was putting the finishing touches on his most ambitious project yet. Using principles derived from captured alien technology, he had developed what he called a cascade resonance disruptor. The device was crude by alien standards, built from scavenged electronics, and powered by a modified car battery, but it could theoretically disable Zephyrian energy shields across a wide area. The theory is sound, he explained to General Hayes during a secure transmission. Their shield generators operate on quantum resonance frequencies. If we can introduce the right kind of interference pattern, we can cause a cascade failure that will drop their defenses across an entire battle group. How large an area are we talking about? Radius of approximately 50 kilometers, assuming optimal conditions. The effect would last for roughly 10 minutes before their systems could compensate. General Hayes felt a spark of hope for the first time since the invasion began. 10 minutes is enough time for our forces to engage them with conventional weapons. Can you build more of these devices? That's the beauty of it, General. The principles are simple enough that any competent electronics engineer can replicate the design. I'm transmitting the specifications to every resistance cell on the planet. Within hours, similar devices were being constructed in hidden workshops across the globe. The materials were common, the assembly was straightforward, and the potential impact was enormous. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had developed a weapon that could level the technological playing field. The test came during the Battle of Denver. Zephyrian forces had surrounded the city, preparing for a final assault that would eliminate one of the largest remaining resistance strongholds. Hidden in the mountains outside the city, a team of engineers activated the first cascade resonance disruptor just as the alien attack began. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Across the entire Zephyrian battle group, energy shields flickered and died. Weapons systems failed. Vehicles that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves vulnerable to conventional human weapons. In the 10 minutes before the aliens could restore their systems, human forces destroyed more enemy equipment than the previous 3 days combined. The tactical implications rippled across both sides of the conflict. Humanity had proven that Zephyrian technology was not invincible. The human ingenuity could find solutions to seemingly impossible problems. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the longer the war continued, the more dangerous they became. Admiral Thekmore stared at the casualty reports from Denver with mounting horror. In a single engagement, his forces had lost more personnel and equipment than in any previous battle of the invasion. The humans had achieved something that should have been impossible with their primitive technology. Recall all ground forces to orbital positions, he ordered. Prepare for total planetary bombardment. If these humans cannot be conquered, they must be eliminated before they develop more advanced countermeasures. But even as he gave the order, Thekmore understood that the war had already changed. The species they had dismissed as primitive had proven themselves to be something unprecedented in galactic history, an enemy that became more dangerous under pressure, that adapted faster than they could be suppressed, and that seemed to thrive on the very conflicts that broke other civilizations. The Zephyrians had awakened humanity's greatest strength without realizing it. They had turned a species of individuals into a unified force, focused entirely on the single goal of survival. They had given humanity an enemy worthy of its full attention, and that was a mistake that would echo through galactic history. Phase 3 was about to begin, but both sides now understood that the rules of engagement had changed forever. The orbital bombardment of Phase 3 began at 3:47 GMT, 1 week after the Battle of Denver. From his command ship, Admiral Thekmore watched as energy beams capable of cracking continents lanced down toward Earth's surface. Every major population center was targeted simultaneously in an assault designed to break humanity's will to resist once and for all. Target Priority Alpha, New York Metroplex, population 8 million. Reported weapons coordinator Kethval as the first beam struck. The city's skyline vanished in a flash of superheated plasma that could be seen from orbit. Target Priority Beta, London Metroplex, population 9 million. Target Priority Gamma, Tokyo Metroplex, population 14 million. The list continued as humanity's greatest cities were systematically erased from existence. Los Angeles, Paris, Moscow, Beijing, Mumbai, São Paulo, Cairo. In the span of 2 hours, over 200 million humans perished in the most devastating attack in recorded galactic history. But Admiral Thekmore was learning that humans did not respond to devastation the way other species did. Instead of surrender, the bombardment triggered something that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. President Morrison was in the Mount Weather bunker when the reports began flooding in. The secure facility's walls shuddered as Washington, D.C. was transformed into a crater of molten glass. But the underground command center held. Around her, military officers and civilian leaders watched in horror as satellite feeds showed their civilization being methodically destroyed. Casualty estimates, she asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the disaster unfolding around them. Conservative estimate, 250 million dead in the first wave, reported General Hayes. Every major urban center on the eastern seaboard is gone. We're receiving similar reports from Europe, Asia, and South America. Morrison closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the greatest catastrophe in human history. When she opened them again, her expression was transformed. The politician was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Give me every remaining military commander on the planet," she ordered, "and patch me through to Moscow, Beijing, London, and every other surviving government. It's time to stop fighting each other and start fighting back." The global response to the bombardment was unlike anything the Zephyrians had observed in their centuries of conquest. Instead of fragmenting into panic and despair, humanity's survivors began coordinating with unprecedented efficiency. Political differences that had seemed insurmountable vanished overnight as the species unified around a single imperative: survival. In the ruins of New York, Captain Maria Santos was leading a group of survivors through the subway tunnels when a call came through on her emergency radio. The tunnels had protected them from the orbital strike, and now they were organizing the evacuation of anyone still alive in the devastated city. All military personnel, this is Emergency Command Authority. The transmission crackled through the static. Operation Prometheus is now active. Repeat, Operation Prometheus is active. All forces are to implement Omega protocols immediately. Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the nuclear winter settling over the ruined city. Operation Prometheus was a theoretical plan that had existed only in the most classified military databases, a strategy so desperate that it had never been seriously considered. Until now. "You heard the order," she told her team. "We're not running anymore. Time to show these bastards what humans are really capable of." Operation Prometheus was the culmination of everything humanity had learned about their enemies. In the weeks since the Battle of Denver, resistance cells have been sharing information, technologies, and tactics through the fragmentary communication networks. The Cascade resonance disruptor had been refined and mass-produced. Captured alien technology had been reverse-engineered and weaponized. Most importantly, human military doctrine had evolved to exploit every weakness in Zephyrian tactics. Dr. Robert Kim was at the center of the operation, coordinating from a mobile laboratory hidden in the Rocky Mountains. His team had spent the past week perfecting what they called asymmetric technological warfare, using human creativity to overcome alien advantages. "The disruptors are just the beginning," he explained to the assembled resistance leaders during a secure video conference. We've identified 17 different vulnerabilities in their technology, from their ship's navigation systems to their individual armor suits. The key is coordinated, simultaneous attacks that prevent them from adapting. The plan was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Humanity would launch a synchronized global assault on every Zephyrian position simultaneously, using tactics and weapons specifically designed to exploit the aliens' technological dependencies. The operation would succeed or fail based on perfect timing and the willingness of every human participant to accept near-certain death in service of the species' survival. General Hayes was coordinating the military aspects of the operation from her command bunker in Colorado. We have confirmation from resistance cells on every continent. Total participating forces, approximately 2 million personnel. We're looking at a casualty rate of 80% minimum. Acceptable, Morrison replied without hesitation. What about the orbital component? Dr. Kim's team has completed modifications to our remaining space assets. The International Space Station will serve as our primary weapons platform, along with 17 surviving satellites. It's not much, but it might be enough. High above Earth's surface, Commander David Park floated in the cramped confines of the International Space Station, now transformed into humanity's most desperate weapon. The research facility had been retrofitted with cascade resonance disruptors, electromagnetic pulse generators, and kinetic projectile systems built from scavenged materials. It was a makeshift arsenal that would have been considered impossible a month ago. ISS to ground control, he reported. All systems green. We have a clear shot at their flagship when you give a word. The plan required precise timing. Ground forces would activate their disruptors simultaneously, dropping Zephyrian shields across the planet. In the brief window before the aliens could compensate, every human weapon would fire at once. Conventional missiles, improvised explosives, captured energy weapons, biological agents, chemical attacks, and kinetic projectiles would strike Zephyrian positions from orbit to ground level. Admiral Thekmore was reviewing the bombardment results when the first reports of unusual activity began filtering in from his sensor operators. After hours of devastating attacks, human electromagnetic emissions had almost completely ceased. The planet appeared to be entering the final collapse phase that preceded total surrender. Admiral, Sensor Specialist Krillion's voice carried a note of confusion. I'm detecting coordinated movement patterns across all major landmasses. The humans appear to be massing for some kind of coordinated action. Impossible. Our psychological warfare models indicate that bombardment of this magnitude should result in complete societal breakdown. These humans should be fleeing in panic, not organizing. Nevertheless, Admiral, the patterns are consistent with pre-attack positioning. Multiple energy signatures consistent with our own technology are being detected in proximity to human force concentrations. Thekmore felt the first stirring of genuine concern. How much of our technology have they captured? Estimates suggest the humans have acquired approximately 12% of our deployed ground assets through battlefield salvage and successful attacks on our positions. The implications were staggering. 12% represented hundreds of weapons, dozens of vehicles, and vast amounts of equipment that humans could study, reverse engineer, and potentially weaponize. In his centuries of conquest, Thekmore had never encountered a species capable of adapting alien technology so rapidly. Increase orbital surveillance, he ordered. I want to know what they're planning. The answer came exactly 18 minutes later, at the moment Operation Prometheus commenced. Across Earth's surface, 2 million humans activated their weapons simultaneously. Cascade resonance disruptors fired in perfect synchronization, creating a planet-wide interference pattern that overwhelmed every Zephyrian shield generator in the system. Commander Park had a perfect view of the battle from orbit. One moment, the Zephyrian fleet was an impregnable wall of energy shields and advanced weapons. The next, they were vulnerable targets floating helplessly in space as their defensive systems failed catastrophically. All weapons, fire! He shouted into his communicator as the ISS unleashed everything it had. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to orbital velocity, slammed into the nearest Zephyrian cruiser. Electromagnetic pulse weapons disabled their navigation systems. Most devastatingly, a crude nuclear warhead cobbled together from research reactor materials detonated directly against the flagship's hull. On the ground, the assault was equally devastating. Human forces emerged from hiding with captured energy weapons, improvised explosives, and conventional firearms modified with alien targeting ammunition. Zephyrian positions that had seemed impregnable were overrun in minutes as their technological advantages vanished. Captain Santos led her team through the ruins of Manhattan, targeting a Zephyrian command post that had been carved into the bedrock beneath the city. With their shields down, the aliens were vulnerable to everything from grenades to small arms fire. The fighting was vicious and close quarters, but for the first time since the invasion began, humans held the advantage. "They're not invincible," she shouted to her team as they cleared the command center. "They bleed just like everything else." The Zephyrian casualties were enormous. In the first hour of Operation Prometheus, human forces destroyed or damaged over 40% of the invasion fleet. Ground installations were overrun, command structures were shattered, and thousands of alien soldiers found themselves fighting for their lives against an enemy they no longer understood. Admiral Thekmore watched his tactical displays dissolve into chaos as red indicators proliferated across his fleet. Ships that had conquered star systems were being destroyed by primitive kinetic weapons. Ground forces that had never known defeat were retreating from human positions. Most impossibly, his own flagship was venting atmosphere through hull breaches caused by nuclear weapons that shouldn't have been capable of penetrating Zephyrian armor. "Fleet status report," he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. 17 vessels destroyed, 23 severely damaged, replied Fleet Coordinator Jen Kai, her voice barely controlled. "Ground forces report casualties exceeding 60%. Admiral, we're being overwhelmed by coordinated attacks using our own technology against us." "How is this possible?" "Our intelligence indicated this species lacked the capability for unified action." "Intelligence was wrong, Admiral. These humans appear to function as a collective when threatened, sharing information and resources across their entire species instantaneously. They've turned their planet into a single weapons platform." Thekmore understood that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The species that his scouts had dismissed as primitive had proven themselves capable of innovations that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about warfare, technology, and civilization itself. "Signal Fleet Command," he ordered. "Request immediate reinforcement. Classification, Omega-level threat." But even as he gave the order, Thekmore realized it might be too late. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they were not merely defending their world, but actively learning to fight a stellar war. If they could adapt this quickly to Zephyrian technology, what would they be capable of given time to develop their own equivalents? The thought that truly terrified him was the possibility that Operation Prometheus was not humanity's desperate last stand, but their opening move in a war that would extend far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Kim was monitoring the battle from his mobile command center when the reports began filtering in. Human casualties were devastating, as predicted, but the tactical objectives were being achieved beyond their most optimistic projections. "Confirmed kills on 19 Zephyrian capital ships," reported his tactical coordinator. "Ground forces have successfully captured 12 intact command posts and are reporting acquisition of advanced communication equipment. More importantly," added Dr. Maria Santos from her position at the captured CERN facility, "we're intercepting their military communications. Their fleet is requesting reinforcements and classifying Earth as what translates to extinction-level threat." The implications were clear to everyone listening. Humanity had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, but in doing so, they had marked themselves as a threat to the Zephyrian Empire's survival. The war would no longer be about conquest and subjugation, but about the mutual annihilation of two species that could not coexist. President Morrison received the battle reports in her bunker, surrounded by the surviving leadership of human civilization. The casualties were staggering, the infrastructure damage was incalculable, and most of Earth's major cities lay in ruins. But they had achieved something that no other species in galactic history had managed. They had made the Zephyrians afraid. Phase 2 of Operation Prometheus is approved, she announced. Begin immediate reverse engineering of all capture technology. I want our own starships in space within 6 months. The war had entered a new phase, one that would determine not just the survival of humanity, but the future balance of power in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had awakened something in the human species that they could never have predicted, and now both civilizations faced a future that neither had prepared for. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and neither was willing to back down. 6 months after Operation Prometheus, the first human-built starship lifted off from a launch facility carved into the Australian outback. The UNSS Defiance was a hybrid of captured Zephyrian technology and human engineering cobbled together from the wreckage of the invasion fleet and powered by the desperate ingenuity of a species fighting for its existence. Dr. Robert Kim stood in the ship's cramped bridge, watching Earth shrink in the view screen as they achieved humanity's first faster-than-light journey. Around him, the crew worked with the focused intensity of people who understood they were making history. FDL drive stable, reported Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez, her hands dancing across controls that would have been incomprehensible a year ago. We're maintaining 0.75 light speed toward the coordinates recovered from the Zephyrian command ship. Kim nodded grimly. The coordinates led to a Zephyrian supply depot 15 light-years from Earth, humanity's first target in a war that had evolved far beyond planetary defense. The species that had once been content to fight among themselves had been forged into something entirely new by the crucible of alien invasion. Time to target: 18 hours at current velocity. 18 hours to complete humanity's transformation from a terrestrial species to an interstellar threat. Kim reflected on how much had changed since that first night when alien ships had appeared in Earth's skies. The humans who had survived the invasion were not the same species that had existed before it. They were harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. Back on Earth, the reconstruction was proceeding with the same ruthless efficiency that had characterized Operation Prometheus. President Morrison stood in the war room of the new Geneva facility, the underground complex that now served as humanity's military headquarters. The walls were covered with star charts, tactical displays, and intelligence reports gathered from captured Zephyrian databases. Status report on the fleet construction program, she requested. General Hayes consulted her tablet, scrolling through production figures that would have been impossible before the invasion. 37 vessels completed, another 63 in various stages of construction. The shipyards in Antarctica and Siberia are operating around the clock. Estimated completion of Phase 1 fleet, 8 months. Crew training. Accelerated programs are showing remarkable results. Human adaptation to Zephyrian technology continues to exceed projections. Our pilots are already outperforming alien standards in simulation. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing humanity's expanding military capabilities. The species that had spent centuries fighting each other had redirected that expertise toward a single enemy with devastating effectiveness. Every lesson learned from terrestrial conflicts, every innovation in warfare, every tactical development from human history had been synthesized into a doctrine designed specifically for interstellar combat. What about the other projects? Dr. Elizabeth Harper stepped forward from her position at the Biological Warfare Station. The pathogen development program is ahead of schedule. We've identified 17 different biological agents that are lethal to Zephyrian physiology but harmless to humans. Field testing begins next month. The transformation of human civilization was complete in ways that went far beyond technology. The invasion had eliminated the political, economic, and social divisions that had defined the species for millennia. Nationalism, racism, religious conflicts, and territorial disputes had all vanished overnight when faced with an external threat to the species' survival. What emerged was something unprecedented, a genuinely unified human civilization focused entirely on warfare. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, promoted from her battlefield command to leader of the new Space Force, was coordinating humanity's first interstellar offensive. The woman who had learned to fight aliens in the ruins of San Diego now commanded a fleet that could project power across dozens of star systems. Intelligence indicates the Zephyrians have requested reinforcements from their core worlds, she reported during the daily briefing. We estimate they're assembling a fleet of over 1,000 ships to return to Earth. Timeline: approximately 8 months, assuming they maintain standard logistical patterns. Morrison felt a familiar sense of anticipation. 8 months to complete humanity's transition from planetary defense to interstellar offense. 8 months to demonstrate that the species the aliens had dismissed as primitive had become something that the galaxy had never seen before. Then, we'd better make sure we're not here when they arrive. The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, home to the Zephyrian supply depot that would become humanity's first interstellar target. Dr. Kim watched the tactical displays as their sensors mapped the alien installation, a massive orbital platform surrounded by dozens of automated defense stations. Analysis? He requested. Lieutenant Commander Park, the former ISS commander who now served as the ship's tactical officer, studied the sensor readings with the expertise of someone who had learned to fight aliens the hard way. Standard Zephyrian defensive pattern, layered energy shields, automated weapon platforms, approximately 50 vessels on patrol duty. Under normal circumstances, this installation could hold off a fleet 10 times our size. But these aren't normal circumstances. No, sir. We have advantages they don't expect. The Zephyrians had built their civilization on technological superiority and predictable tactical doctrines. They expected their enemies to follow established patterns of warfare, to respect the conventional rules of engagement, and to be intimidated by displays of superior firepower. Humanity had spent the past 6 months learning to do none of those things. Begin Operation Blackout, Kim ordered. The attack commenced with weapons that no Zephyrian strategist had ever conceived. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, the Defiance deployed a cloud of microscopic machines, each one designed to burrow into alien hull plating and systematically disable electronic systems from within. The nanites were a hybrid of human nanotechnology and captured Zephyrian computational systems, invisible to conventional sensors and programmed to replicate using materials found in alien equipment. Within minutes, the supply depot's automated defenses began failing in cascading system failures. Shield generators overloaded, weapon platforms powered down, and communication arrays went silent as billions of tiny saboteurs ate their way through the installation's technological infrastructure. Phase 2, Kim announced. The second wave of the attack exploited the chaos created by the nanites. Human-designed virus programs, based on Dr. Nakamura's analysis of Zephyrian computer systems, flooded through the installation's network. The viruses were specifically designed to target alien artificial intelligence systems, turning the depot's own computers against their operators. By the time the Zephyrian defenders realized they were under attack, their ability to coordinate a response had been systematically eliminated. Ships that tried to launch found their navigation systems compromised. Weapons that attempted to target the human vessel received false sensor data. Most devastatingly, the installation's distress signal was intercepted and modified, sending false reports of a routine supply transfer to Zephyrian Command. Phase 3. The final assault was conducted with conventional weapons, but applied in ways that demonstrated how thoroughly humans had studied their enemy's psychology. Instead of destroying the installation, the Defiance systematically captured it, taking prisoner every Zephyrian defender and seizing intact the vast stores of equipment, supplies, and, most importantly, information. The interrogation of the prisoners provided humanity with intelligence that would reshape their understanding of the galactic balance of power. The Zephyrian Empire was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems and thousands of worlds. But it was also brittle, dependent on rigid hierarchies and predictable tactics that had worked against every previous enemy. They're not used to adaptation, reported Dr. Harper after completing her analysis of the captured personnel. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority. When that advantage is neutralized, they lack the flexibility to develop alternative strategies. Kim studied the star charts recovered from the depot's databases. The Empire controlled nearly a third of the local galactic arm, but their expansion had followed predictable patterns for centuries. They conquered primitive species, harvested resources, and moved on to the next target. They had never encountered an enemy capable of reverse engineering their technology and turning it against them. More importantly, he observed, they've never faced an enemy capable of learning and adapting faster than they can respond. Every engagement teaches us more about their capabilities while revealing our own capabilities to them. The success of Operation Blackout triggered a wave of similar attacks across Zephyrian space. Human ships, built in the hidden shipyards of Earth and crewed by veterans of the invasion, began striking targets throughout the Empire's outer territories. Supply depots, communication relays, isolated colonies, and patrol fleets all fell victim to tactics that the aliens could not predict or counter. Admiral Thekmore, now commanding the Zephyrian Empire's response to what their leadership had classified as the human crisis, studied the tactical reports with growing desperation. In less than a year, the species his forces had dismissed as primitive had evolved into a threat that challenged the Empire's fundamental assumptions about warfare and civilization. Casualty report, he requested during his daily briefing with High Command. 47 installations destroyed or captured. 138 ships lost. Approximately 12,000 personnel killed, wounded, or missing, reported Intelligence Coordinator Velcam. The humans are demonstrating capabilities that exceed our most advanced projections. Explain. They're not fighting a conventional war. Their attacks target our logistical networks, communication systems, and isolated positions. They avoid direct engagement with our main fleets, instead focusing on disrupting our ability to coordinate responses. High Admiral Morthek interjected from his position at the Strategic Command Console. Most concerning is their technological development rate. Analysis of recovered human equipment shows advancement that should require decades to achieve. They're incorporating our technology into their own systems at an unprecedented pace. The tactical display showed the expanding sphere of human influence, spreading outward from Earth like a virus infecting the galaxy's established order. Each successful operation provided humanity with more resources, more intelligence, and more opportunities to study their enemy's weaknesses. What are your recommendations? Thekmore asked. Complete mobilization of all Imperial forces, Morthek replied grimly. The human species represents an existential threat to the Empire's survival. They must be eliminated before they develop the capability to threaten our core worlds. The order went out across Zephyrian space. Every available ship, every trained soldier, every weapon system was to be marshaled for a final assault on humanity. The Empire would deploy resources on a scale not seen since their first expansion into the galaxy, a fleet capable of sterilizing entire star systems. But on Earth, humanity was preparing for exactly this response. Dr. Kim had returned from his successful mission to find the homeworld transformed into a fortress that spanned continents. Every mountain range concealed shipyards. Every ocean floor housed manufacturing facilities, and every major population center had been converted into a training ground for interstellar warfare. Their coming, President Morrison announced during the global briefing that was transmitted to every human settlement in the solar system. Our intelligence sources indicate the largest military force in galactic history is assembling to destroy us. She paused, looking out at the faces of a species that had been forged by alien invasion into something unprecedented in galactic history. Good. It's time to show them what we've become. The final phase of the war was about to begin but it would not be fought in Earth's skies. Humanity had learned the first rule of interstellar warfare. The species that controls space controls the war. The coming battle would be fought across dozens of star systems as humanity demonstrated that they had evolved beyond the limitations of a single world. Dr. Kim stood in the command center of the UNSS Retribution, the flagship of humanity's first interstellar battle fleet. Around him, the most advanced warships ever constructed by human hands prepared for a confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy. Fleet status, he requested. 217 ships ready for combat. All crews trained, all systems optimal, reported Admiral Mitchell from her position at the tactical station. Dr. Kim, we're as ready as we'll ever be. Kim nodded, studying the star charts that showed the approaching Zephyrian armada. The aliens were bringing everything they had, confident that overwhelming force would succeed where their previous tactics had failed. They still didn't understand what they were facing. Then, let's go teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity, he said. All ships, engage faster than light drives. Destination, the Zephyrian core worlds. The war that had begun with alien ships appearing over Earth was about to end with human ships appearing over the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. The species that had once fought each other over resources and territory was now united in a single purpose, proving that some prey, when pushed too far, becomes the predator. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology, their numbers, or their weapons. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, and to become something greater than the sum of their parts when faced with an enemy that threatened their existence. The Zephyrians had thought they could win. They were about to discover just how catastrophically wrong they had been.